About a month ago now, I made a functional bomber in Besiege, and you guys really seem to like it. I really enjoyed it too, so I want to make another ethically questionable vehicle, and an attack helicopter seemed just about perfect. Now to start on this helicopter, the first thing I wanted to do was work on the propeller, and you can see I'm doing that here. Now I'm using a powered wheel and 4 propeller blades to get up in the air, and already while this does work, there's no control at all, so it ends up just going up until eventually it falls over. Now to hopefully get some extra stability here, what I wanted to do is add a wheel onto the bottom that spins in the opposite direction. This will create a counter torque and should allow the whole mechanism to stay still. Unfortunately though, it was really hard to tune, and this still wasn't going to let me steer in any direction that I wanted to. So my next thought here was actually to start over again, but this time focus on a large base. Once I had that, I want to put back down my wheel, and this time before I put on the propeller blades, you see here I'm putting down these powered rotation joints. These are really important here because you can see as I put these propeller blades on them, I'm able to rotate them up and down, and that's going to adjust the angle the blades make with the air. Now as I try moving up here, you can see it works just like before, but if I start rotating these back down so the blades are more flat, I start to fall down as I produce less thrust. Now that's really good, but I can actually do a little bit more at that, and I wanted to try that here. You can see I replaced all the powered joints with unpowered joints, and after that I added a piston and a swivel joint on top of the wheel. Now on one of those rotating joints, I put down a hinge and I attached it with the brace right up to the top. You can see as I move around here, if I extend out the piston, it rotates down the blade, which is good, but if I unattach the piston assembly from the wheel and instead attach it to the base, you can see I get something a little different here. As I rotate around, the blade moves up and down more if I have the piston extended. That's what I want to be seeing, and that'll allow me to produce more thrust on one side of the blade than the other. But the whole mechanism did seem like it was binding up a lot, and after adding in a couple extra joints here, you can see it has a much wider range of movement, and overall, this looks a lot better. Now I switched the orientation of the piston here, and this was so I could start working on my up and down control. As I push up the piston more, it should rotate up all the blades, and you can see that working here. So with the up and down system mostly sorted here, what I wanted to do was go back to my previous system and refine it a ton so I could attach it to all of the other blades. Eventually here, I did get what I was looking for, and the system seemed to allow the blade to move up and down while not being too loose. So with all this looking good, what I wanted to do here is add on all of the other propeller blade connections, and this was all pretty much copy and paste. So you can see here, on the top swivel joint, I added 3 more hinges, and I added 3 more swivel joints. With that done, I attached it all up here, and going into the air, it does seem to get some lift, but it's really hard to see if it's working because the entire base is rotating. So what I wanted to do is fit this on some suspension here, and this was going to prevent the entire body from rotating, but I should be able to see if it starts to tilt. And while this didn't work as well as I was hoping, as I moved the piston out, you can see the entire mechanism slightly tilt to the left, and that was a pretty good sign. Now next up here, you can actually see what I'm doing is moving the swash plate to the bottom of the helicopter, and now once I did that, I'm also adding on 2 pistons attached to this. The reason I did this is that one of the pistons is going to expand like before, but I have another one that contracts in. And while this was working, it was really loose, and I could see there was a lot of vibration in here. So what I wanted to do here is add on 2 more copies of this just to make it a bit more rigid, and already it seemed to be a lot better. So with that looking good, I wanted to copy this over again, but this time it's at a 90-degree angle. This allows me to push in and out the mechanism, and at first here it did seem to be working, but it was really loose. And I did have one piston that was accidentally attached to the wrong joint, and this helped a little, but you can see the bottom point is able to move up and down a lot more than I'd like, and overall this is not very well supported. So what I decided to do here was add on 3 more copies of this, and with that, it should give me a lot more stability. And testing it now, it does seem to be way better here. As you move it in and out, you can really see the blade pitch changing, and nothing seems to be vibrating or moving in any way I wouldn't want. So with that seemingly working, the next thing I wanted to do here was add on some more wings, and these are going to stop me from spinning in the air. Now they won't entirely stop me as you see here, but they will allow me to start pitching up the blade a little bit, and you can see as I keep doing that, I am able to keep a mostly consistent hover. Now this really isn't perfect though, so what I decided to do next was get rid of all of the wing panels, and you see what I'm doing is copying my mechanism over again. This time though, it's mirrored, and the reason that's important is that I'm gonna have a second blade going the opposite direction to cancel out the torque. That'll make it stop rotating, and if I brace these together here, I can try flying it in the air. And coming off the ground here, it seems to work well, and as you move in and out the swash plate, I am able to keep a consistent hover. Now again, this isn't perfect, and I didn't really want to have 2 blades, but this at least worked to show that the swash plate mechanism was working, and the next thing I wanted to do here is clear off some of this extra stuff I had, and I wanted to shrink down the mechanism a lot. I realized here I could just scale the entire thing down like this, and if I throw it back in the middle here and connect it up with a brace, I can give it a shot now. Now it looks a little ridiculous, but it does seem to move it in and out, and while the pistons are kind of pulling pulling out of the wood blocks, it did seem to move the swash plate, and I wanted to hook 2 of these up again and see if it still worked fine. And off the ground here, it is still working, but it's a lot more sloppy. I'm having a lot more trouble moving side to side, and it seems like the whole thing is just not moving that fluidly. Now, at the very least, it was working well enough, though, that I wanted to start working on the tail rotor here. Now, this tail rotor is going to solve the problem of it trying to rotate around, and my first idea here is to add a spinning block to the back of the helicopter. This sort of worked. You can see it is stopping it from rotating mostly, but now it's pushing it off to the side, and the whole thing ends up moving a lot. So next up here, I wanted to try a different design instead, and this one you can see it in doing is putting a wheel on the bottom, and I'm putting down 4 wood logs. Now, on those logs, I'm putting down ballasts, and I'm going to set their weight to the max. This is going to create a reaction wheel, and once I spin this up, you can see here the base is mostly not spinning. Now, it is moving a little bit here, but I realized the helicopter is really underpowered now. But at least with something that was somewhat working, I wanted to move on to the missile next. Now, starting out in the missile, you can see I have a ballast out here, and I'm putting down 4 grabbers. On those grabbers, I put down 4 rockets. After that, I wanted to give it a test here, and it did start to push it forward, but it was really weak. So next up, you can see I turned up their thrust a lot, and with that done, it's working a lot better already. Now, the missile was unnecessarily large, though, so what I wanted to do is delete all of the grabbers and brace the rockets directly to the ballast. By doing this, I saved the weight of the grabbers, and you can see here, it seems to work just about as well. And with that done, I had my bottom stage, but I did want to make one more stage. This one's the exact same thing, except I'm going to set it to have a ton more power here, and you can see as I throw it up into the air, the bottom stage keeps it going for a bit, but as soon as I launch off that top stage, it really powers through, and this is going to make sure that I go in a straight line right to my target. Now on that top stage, you can also see here, I put down a grabber, and I put down a bomb. This will allow me to blow up whatever I want to target here, and firing off the top stage, it does seem to throw it really fast, but I also have a lack of stability, and my rocket kind of just wants to go everywhere. So to fix that, I put down some blades in the back here, and also you can see I deleted the bomb. Now this was so I could do something really similar to my bomber video, and what I'm doing here is putting down 4 grabbers at the end of a wheel, and this is going to allow me to spin the grabbers up and throw off the bombs and create a larger pattern. And after getting those bombs on there, I need a way to automatically get them to fire off, and to do that, I put down an altimeter. This will send a signal once I fall below a certain height, and once I hit that, you can see here I'm automatically able to fire off the top stage right into the ground. This missile was still really big though, so to hopefully trim it down, first I got rid of the wheel in the front and I replaced it with a spinning block. After that, I also added in some controls to the back, and these are going to be some powered rotation joints. Once I had that here, you can see I'm able to slightly move it up, and with help of some extra wing panels, I'm able to go where I want and fling off the bombs straight into the ground. And in this last test here, you can see me able to completely turn around with these missiles and pretty much go wherever I want. Now that's going to work great, but these missiles are really heavy and I wanted to create more lift. So I went back to the helicopter here, and you can see what I'm doing is adding on one of these wooden rods before I put on the propeller blades. That's going to make them spin faster, and hopefully I should get some more lift. Now also, to get it to stop rotating, you can see I put back down my back rotor, but this time I'm putting it in a lot closer to the rotor. This helped out a ton here, and you can see in this test, while things are very chaotic, it did seem like I was able to somewhat consistently keep it up here. Now I realized finer control over the rotor would definitely be a good way to go here, so to do that, I pushed up the blades, and I'm reattaching them now. This extra distance means that I have less swivel when I move around, and overall, it's a lot easier to get some fine movements. In this test, while I wasn't perfectly hovering, I was almost able to keep it together, and with that, I wanted to start adding on the full body of the helicopter. Starting out here, I just wanted to put down some wood blocks and very carefully make an outline. This will give me a very good 2D version of what I want to do, and I figured once I have that, I could start adding some depth to it. Now, for the actual shell, I'm going to be using these wooden panels, and they're really convenient here. And after getting this last piece on, I started bowing in some of the pieces to the middle. Then I ended up copying it over to the other side here, and afterwards, I started attaching the 2 halves to these center panels. Now, overall, the shell wasn't looking half bad here, and with that done, I wanted to add back on the rear rotor, but this time you'll notice I'm using a wheel and propeller blades. And at first here, I was going in the wrong direction and making the problem worse, but after turning it around here, it did seem to help out a lot, and I was able to keep myself mostly going straight. Now, the one control I still haven't implemented yet is the one to go straight up or down, and for that, I'm putting it in here using these rotating joints on the blades. These rotate up or down all of the blades at once, and that creates more lift or less lift, and that gets the effect that I want. It also avoids me having to use a swash plate for this, so it's a pretty simple design. Now, I also threw down some feet pretty quickly here, just so I'm able to land down and get everything off the ground. Now, that was looking pretty good, and of course, I went back to the missiles here, and it was time to put them on the helicopter. Now, I got a little distracted at first and ended up bombing the helicopter, but after that, I decided to put it on the side here and start giving this some arms. Now, my plan was to use one grabber on the back and have one of these on each side. Now, the missiles were sort of bending on the ends of the arm a little bit though, so to fix that, I added on a couple more grabbers to the front, and these should make it a lot more rigid. This seemed to help out a ton here, and when I tried to fire it off, it did seem to work. Now, one missile did slightly get caught here, but otherwise, the other one went off fine, and next thing I wanted to do is add on one more missile to each side. This is pretty much a straight copy and paste, but I did have a slight issue here. The missiles were slightly clipping into each other, so I had to move them down a little bit. With that solved though, I was able to fire them off, and it seemed to be fine. The issue though is that these things are going to be way heavier now, and keeping this up in the air, the rotor has to go really fast. This is fine normally, but getting this working with unbreaking off is gonna be challenging. Before that though, I wanted to add on one last thing, and that's gonna be a gun to the front. At first, I figured I could put some crossbows on a wheel here and make a machine gun type of thing. Now, the helicopter kind of freaked out there, not sure what that's about, but otherwise, this did seem to fire pretty well here. But I wanted to explore some different options here, because these crossbows are gonna generate a ton of recoil. Now, my first idea was to drop some ballast down a tube and then have a water cannon shoot them out. Now, after setting up the tube the way I'd like, I ended up dropping in 3 of these ballasts here, and with that done, I fired them off with the water cannon, but they were sort of getting caught in the tube, and the water cannon itself was still gonna have a ton of recoil, so this really wasn't that much better. Now, I tried replacing the tube with these half pipes that have almost no resistance, and I also replaced the water cannon with one of these spinning wheels. My plan was to just keep hitting out the ballast and throwing them out the front, but the problem was they were getting caught a lot here, and it still just didn't seem nearly as good as what I made before. So I decided to make some space in the front for the spinning crossbow thing, and I was hoping the recoil wasn't going to be too bad. Now, after getting that first crossbow in here, I tried to shoot it off, and before I buffed its stats, you can see it does shoot the crossbows off, but it's not that impressive. So I added 3 more of these on, and I buffed their stats just like I did before, and now it seemed to be quite a bit better. For some reason though, you can see that these arrows were getting caught on the front of the helicopter, and that wasn't perfectly working. Most of them did go out the front though, so that should be okay. Now, next up here, it's time to get this working on unbreaking mode, and starting out here, you can see I'm putting down a ton more braces on the rotor. These should keep it together a bit better, but trying this out, you can see that it does kind of fly apart sometimes. Now, one other thing I did here is added on a second tier of blades. This should create more lift, but I shouldn't have to get the blades going any faster. Now, unfortunately though, this seemed to put a lot more stress to the center wheel, and as soon as I tried to spin this up, it ended up just breaking. So the single propeller design still seemed to be the best, and while I was pretty close to getting off the ground here, you can see I was still pretty stuck. Now, my next plan here was just to add some balloons into the middle of the helicopter to give it a little bit more lift. This should work pretty well here, and once I set the buoyancy of these to be really high, I also set the string length to be 0 so that they stay inside the helicopter. Now, I got it all braced up here, and I wanted to give this a test. And honestly, it didn't seem too bad at all. The swash plate still had a ton of authority to be able to spin me around wherever I need to go, but the balloons kept me up in the air pretty well, and I was able to have a much more consistent hover than before. My main issue now is that the missiles were such an important part of the weight of this. As soon as I fired them off, the balloons were flying me up into the air way too fast. So my next plan was to put down 2 more balloons, and you can see I put down some crossbows. As I fire off my last missiles, these crossbows will shoot the balloons, and that'll generate me less lift. So I copied over the crossbow to the front as well, and giving it a test now, I'm still able to hover like before, but once I fire off my missiles, I'm still able to stay in the air and not just flip around like before. And while this does working on braking here, I actually am going to go back to my previous design that works on unbraking so I get some of these final shots for you guys here. So guys, thanks for watching. This is a video that I teased like over 6 months ago at this point, and I'm glad I finally got to it. But if you guys have any other ideas for flying things like make Besiege, make sure to leave down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you have any other questions or comments, make sure to leave those down below as well. And otherwise, till next time.